from the world and Atlanta. You're listening to the WCEG Network. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak truth into the community. Log on to WCEGTalkRadio.com and watch us live on your smart TV. Also on Roku cable channel, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and now on Fanbase and Blue Sky. Search for WCEG and subscribe on all social media programs. I'm Anthony C. Aiken, and co-host for our show today is who?
Herman Anderson.
Herman Anderson. And we will be with you this afternoon for the next hour, and we have an exciting guest. But please download our free WCEG mobile app. Alexa, play WCEG Talk Radio, and listen to WCEG on any of our 12 podcast distribution platforms. Last but not least, our disclaimer: the topics and opinion are those of the show host and guests and not WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support. And again, welcome to Veterans Today Talk Radio. How you doing, Herman?
I'm doing just great. I want to welcome our viewers and listeners to Veterans Today. Herman Anderson, Anthony Aiken. We've been doing this for a few years now, and we enjoy empowering our listeners and viewers. We are the worldwide empowerment group, and we breathe life into the community. We empower the community. That's what we do, and that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, but you're doing what? We've been doing this about 10 years. We're starting to look younger.
Actually, I have to agree with you.
Looking younger, man. So, it's just been a joy because we've been fortunate enough to have guests from around the world, and they have brought a lot of good, positive information to our veterans, their families, to our friends that have served this nation with integrity and honor. And I guess the beauty for us is that we've seen some of the fruits of our labor be positive with some of the things people listen to.
Exactly. And at the beginning, in going back to a lot of our previous shows, we always provided people with information about benefits to the DD-214 and how to get in the system. I have just a couple of paragraph document that I received from the VA, and just let me read this to our listeners. Okay. This is the Federal Benefit for Veterans Independent Survivor Handbook, and it is online. As part of our commitment to provide world-class care and benefit to those who have served our nation, VA is pleased to present the 205 VA Federal Benefit Guide for Veteran Dependent Survivors and Caregivers. Mm-hmm. Have you applied for your VA benefit services? Unsure where else you may be eligible for? What else you may be eligible for? Don't miss out on what you have earned. Check out this handy reference guide to learn more. The handbook contains comprehensive listing of VA programs, including phone numbers, website for easy references. The annual Federal Benefit Guide hosts a wealth of information on most VA benefit and services. In just a few bullet points, it addresses compensation, life insurance, pension and fiduciary services, educational benefit, economic development, employment, home loan guarantee programs, mental health resources. This handbook will help veterans and service members and their family understand the full scope of the VA resources available to them. The VA Federal Benefit Guide is available both in print and online. In ways you can get it is the VA website, va.gov. That's one way. The other way is to call the 1-800-827-1000 and request the guide. And there are actually two separate guides, and I've looked at both of them. And the index gives you every website and every 800 number you need to call to get additional information. So I just want to put that out there to our veterans.
That's tremendous, man, because we need to make sure that, again, we speak truth into the community and let our listeners know the importance of having that kind of information. But guess what? We got our guest that just popped up on the phone and online, so we need to let folks know who he is. So let's see if we can bring him in here. Let's see here. Gosh, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are blessed this afternoon to have a friend that Herman and I are pretty close to, and he knows a little bit about the colors purple and gold, but his name is Anthony Tony Holder, and I think our guest will be extremely pleased with his story, the things that he's been doing, etc. So, welcome, sir. How you doing?
I'm fine. Hey, good. Glad to glad for you to have me here. Surprised, but I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to answering your questions or addressing anything you want to bring up with me.
Well, truth in the community is number one. And what we'd like for you to do also to be an inspirational source, because Herman knows and I know, but a lot of our guests don't know about your very interesting background and how you got to where you are. And I know you're a pretty humble guy. You know what I mean? You're a very humble guy, and I've known you a number of years. But today is not about humbling. All right, today is about telling the nation and the world about who Captain Anthony Tony Holder is and how did he get there. Because I guarantee you, you will inspire others with your story. So, Herman, I think it's on him. What do you think?
I'm ready. We'll actually walk through what you want to tell us about yourself, and a little later on in the interview, I want to ask you about today's young folks, what you would recommend to them, and so forth and so on.
Well, first of all, let me start out by saying that I've been blessed all my life, and I like to say that I got where I am today by understanding that it wasn't me that did it by myself. You know, the good Lord was watching out for me. So the good Lord watches out for fools and little babies. I was well over the age of 2. Okay. I grew up in a housing project in the Bronx in New York. My parents weren't educated people. They were from the rural South that migrated northward after World War II was over with. You know, they had a great migration, wanted to get away from the segregated South. They had been sharecroppers out in North Carolina, so they didn't have a whole lot of education because they had to work a lot. So anyway, moved northward, ended up in a housing project. There were 6 of us, boys and girls in the family, 4 boys and 2 girls, my mother and father, plus my aunt and uncle and their 2 kids lived with us also because they also migrated. So we had 14 people in an apartment building, and our apartment was 1 toilet. So, it's not like we had a whole lot to begin with, but, we were small and we had family, and that's just the way it was. And growing up, I was like little kids, I had role models that I would get on TV. And one of the role models that I saw on TV was Superman at the time. This is in black and white TV. And my first inkling about flying was boy, I really like to fly like Superman. So what I did was I went to my mother's linen closet and got one of her best sheets and cut the sheet up. And got a box of Crayola crayons, got my little ruler and everything. And, Superman had that S plate on the station on the back of his cape. So I put my S on there, colored it in there and everything. And then I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I put my sheet or a towel or cape around my neck, and got into the frame of the apartment building that I lived in, and I jumped. I was gonna fly. I was gonna make me fly. It's a good thing I lived on the first floor instead of.
I'm laughing because I did the same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I jumped out thinking that I was going to fly, and like I said, it's a good thing God watches out for fools and little babies. And when my mother found out about it, she didn't know whether to kill me or kiss me. But that's how that's what. But I grew up, also buying little balsa wood models of airplanes or plastic airplanes. They used to come in a kit that you can buy for 25 cents or something. I used to put those things together, but I had no idea or concept about flying an airplane other than I thought they were neat little models. I had never been around a pilot. I'd never been to the airport. I had never been on an airplane before in my life. I didn't know anyone involved in aviation. But I was kind of an industrious little boy. We had the city dump no more than a quarter of a mile from where I lived. And, my parents being poor, we couldn't afford a whole lot of things. So I always figured that if my parents couldn't get it for me, heck, I can go out. I know where the city dump is. I'd go out to the city dump. And if I wanted a bicycle, I'd find a tire over here, and there's a frame over there, and there's some handlebars over there. Oh, there's another tire. So I got 2 wheels. I need me a chain. And I'd learned how to put bicycles together by 9 or 10. I had my first bicycle. In fact, I never bought a bicycle until I was 30 years old. Every bicycle I ever owned, I put them together. And maybe that's how I got into engineering, which I eventually ended up majoring in college. But in high school, I was, being 6'4", I was tall, and I played and growing up in New York City, you play basketball all the time, the city game, and I was a product of that. So I played for my high school team, and I was taking all the courses, pre-college courses, but I only passed them. I would fail math and would take it again in the summertime. Why? Because the coach said, if you want to play, you got to pass these courses. I had no intention of going to college. So I was only passing the courses because I wanted to play basketball, because I thought I was going to get called by the New York Knicks any day. But the phone never rang. So finally, I'm in my senior year in high school, and the kids are talking about, my classmates are talking about flying to Columbia, flying to NYU, flying to the University of this and the University of that. I hadn't applied for anything. I hadn't even taken the SAT, ACT. Finally, there was one other black kid in my class, and he was talking about this school in Washington, D.C. called Howard University. And then he said something like, yeah, and they got some really pretty girls there. I said, well, what's the name of that school again? There I am. I'm 17 years old. All of a sudden, I decided I wanted to go to college. So I applied to Howard University, and this is the very last semester of my senior year. I took the late ACT, SAT, and Howard wrote me back and said, you missed all the acceptance time and when you should have had your application in, but what we'll do is we'll put you on a wait list. And if somebody doesn't come, then we'll try and let you come in. So finally, late summer, like August or something like that, they sent me a postcard. That's what I got, saying that I'd been accepted to Howard and that you can come there and be an English major. Well, I showed up about 2 weeks later, And it just so happened my freshman, I was 17 years old, and my freshman roommate, one of my roommate was an engineering student. And when he went to class for engineering, to enroll in his engineering courses, I took every class that he took. I was supposed to be an English major, but I just followed whatever he took. The only difference was he took Army ROTC and I took Air Force ROTC.
Now, see, you see how Herman started to smile? Because he's an Air Force guy. I told him, you know what? We had an Army guy the last time, so today he's happy.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I took it. I knew nothing about the military. I knew nothing about aviation. I started going to ROTC classes, and they said, any of you guys interested in becoming a pilot? Okay, just show up next week at this dormitory, and you guys got to take a test. So I showed up the following week. I think it was on a weekend, and I sat down and took the test. It was about 3 hours long. I'd never seen that material before in my life. I mean, they had pictures and equations and stuff like that, but somehow I managed to pass the test. They told me I passed. They said, okay, well, you passed the aptitude test, but you still have to pass the physical, okay, because you have to have both the aptitude and the physical. So they said, well, we'll pick you up at the dormitory next week, and we'll take you at the Andrews Air Force Base to get your physical. So it was about 15 of us. They picked us up in the van. They brought us out to Andrews, and there was about 15 of us in the van. And on the way back, it took us all day to be there. We got there like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. We didn't leave Andrews until about 3. So on the way back, curious, everybody's asking, well, how'd you do? How'd you do? And as it turned out of the 15, I was the only one that passed everything. So that's good. They were failing guys for sickle cell anemia, high blood pressure, eyesight, hearing, whatever they can find in the individual. But I managed to pass everything. So the Air Force told me, hey, if you graduate, and we'll commission you and send you to pilot training. And so at the end of my 4 years, I got my degree in engineering. I was commissioned as an officer, and I had commitment to go to pilot training in the Air Force. And fortunately, I had gotten a scholarship offer for the University of Pittsburgh to work on an MBA. I had taken the GRE, and my mother wanted me to do it. And I really didn't do it, but you got to follow your mother's advice. So I started Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, and that's where I met some of the lifelong friends besides the people I knew from college. I met a guy named Wesley Coleman. Anthony, you know Wesley.
Very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Anthony and I were Wesley and I were classmates together. He had graduated from Hampton, and I came out of Howard. And that's when we first met each other, besides being Omega brothers. So Wesley and I had known each other. And in fact, he was dating his wife, Barbara, at the same time. So Wesley and I had known each other since we were grad students together. But anyway, the program is a 3-semester program. You don't get vacations. You stay there the whole year. So after the second semester, I just really wasn't interested in doing the MBA program. They had a Air Force base not too far away, and I could see jets taking off. So instead of looking at the accounting board, I was staring out the windows, watching airplanes fly by, thinking that this is what I really want to do. So, so my last semester, I dropped out. Told, I'm taking up somebody's time, and told the Air Force I'm ready to start pilot training. And it took them about 2 months to get me to a class. And so when I got to class, it was at Reese Air Force Base in Lubbock, Texas. And when I got there, there were 60 guys in my class, and there were only 2 blacks in the class, myself and another guy from, he had come out of Grambling. And the rest of the class were over 80% of my class were graduates from the Air Force Academy, MIT, Stanford, UCLA, University of Texas. I mean, some really big schools. And here I was, and George, his name was George. I'm from Howard. He's from Grambling. And once again, I had no flying experience whatsoever. The very first airplane they give you is like a Cessna 172. And they tell you you get 10 hours to learn the airplane solo out, or you go home. And, all the other classes was moving ahead of me because they had already had flying experience. And George, he didn't have much flying experience himself. So at the first, unfortunately, George washed out of the class because of academics and flying. And I was doing okay in the academics, but I wasn't quite sure of the flying because I had never flown an airplane before. But fortunately, my instructor, he allowed me to solo out on the 10th hour. Once again, I soloed out on the 10th hour and moved on to subsonic jets before going supersonic. And so out of the 1 year program, we started with 60 and we finished with 30. And I was the only African American or person of color in my class when we finished. Yeah, George had left after about 45 to 60 days. So yeah, I was pretty rubbed up, and I got my wings as a United States Air Force jet pilot. I was 22 years old. They assigned me the B-52. I was a bomber pilot. So here I am. I just finished fighter type training, and now I'm going to bomber training. And it took me about 6 months to go through that training. And I'm flying a B-52. B-52 got 8 jet engines on it. I'm carrying 4 nuclear weapons. I got 4 targets in Russia in front of me, and I'm 24 years old. That's what I'm doing. I'm getting my orders from the President of the United States. So that's what I did for the next 6 years. I was stationed out in California, fortunately in the Los Angeles area. And now that I had my wings, I was ready to go back and complete graduate school. So I enrolled at the University of Southern California in the engineering program and finished my MS degree, Master Science degree in systems engineering at the University of Southern California. So I was 24, 25 years old, jet bomber pilot with nuclear weapons, and did that for 6 years. And then I got out and got my job as a airline pilot with FedEx, and I flew over 35 years with them, flying in and out, international jumbo jet captain. And that's what I did for over 35 years, flying all over the world.
Well, you know what? If I can interrupt you just for a minute, because I think the basic theme from your story is that you were covered. From your background, God covered you. And I was very happy to hear you say that because your success, a lot of people were involved with that. There was a lot of people, a lot of cover. And Herman, there's another part that this humble brother is not telling us yet because he's a give back. He gives back. So, in addition to him serving in the military and doing this thing with FedEx, he's developed a program that I think our listeners need to hear from the projects to what?
Well,
No, I'm waiting on him to say it. From projects to
Oh, oh, well, I've gotten involved in, after I retired, particularly, I got involved with I've already had been involved with the various organizations with African American pilots from the very inception, one of which is that it's now called OBAP, OBAP, Organization of Black Airline Professionals. But when I joined it, I was still in the Air Force, and it was called the Organization of Black Airline Pilots. It evolved later on to airline professionals because they wanted to let other people than just pilots. But when I first started, it was OBAP. And then since I've come here to Atlanta, I got involved with the Atlanta chapter Tuskegee Airmen, where I became the director of the aviation and STEM program. It's called TAS, Tuskegee Airmen Aviation and STEM Training, because of my background in both engineering and aviation. And I would take kids and involve them in both aviation and STEM to give them the opportunity that I didn't have. there's one particular story, and I think that's what you might be referring to, Anthony. I had been an airline pilot by this time. I was a captain, and I was living in Memphis, Tennessee, and I didn't have my uniform on. I was walking in the supermarket, the Kroger supermarket, and I saw this young man stocking shelves on the supermarket stand, and a young black kid. And it reminded me of myself because I used to do that's one of the various jobs I used to have when I was growing up, working in the supermarket. But anyway, something just told me, just walk up to that young man and find out what he wants to do in life. And I didn't know him. I never saw him before in my life. Didn't know him from a can of paint, as they say. He had never seen me before. So I walked up to the young man and I said, young man, and he looked up and he stood up. He said, yes, sir, can I help you? I said, son, what do you want to do in life? Well, he was a little bit surprised, but he answered right away. He said, well, sir, I'm in my senior year in high school and I'm about to graduate, and I'd like to go to college and major in engineering, and I want to become a jet pilot. I said, son, you just hit the jackpot. And when I told him who I was, what I did, what I majored in, and what I was currently doing, his eyes just got as big as a sauce. Okay. And I began to mentor this young man in his career from that point on, all the way through college. He did go to college, get his degree in engineering. He got a commission in the United States Marine Corps, flew in the Marine Corps for 20 years as a pilot. And he came out of the Marine Corps, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago. I was invited to his retirement from the Marine Corps after 20 years. And he got his first job as an airline pilot with American Airlines. And he's a captain now with American Airlines. He's been there for about 6 years. And one of the things I did, I bought as a pilot, we're very technical. And the watch that I had when I was flying as a pilot, I gave it to him and said, just wear it and enjoy life as a pilot. And he wears that watch to this day. So I'm humbled.
That's a great
people
story.
like him. Yeah.
That's a great story because, just to backtrack, my wife's uncle has been involved with OBAP, and this gentleman pretty well. He's one of the founders, Bill Norwood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Bill
Norwood.
Bill and Molly Norwood.
Yeah, but that's family. So, when you said that, my wife and I used to volunteer to do work with OBAP when he was involved with that type of thing. And Tony Marshall is another person that and we've been to OBAP's conventions in DC and all those kind of things. So it's great to hear you say that. But what I was talking about was the project, the pilot thing, which you've eloquently discussed, because that's a great story in itself, whereby you go around and tell individuals of your trials and your tribulations. And here you are coming from the project and dealing with small wooden airplanes to carrying a nuclear bombs codes.
Yeah, jumping out of an apartment building with a towel wrapped around my neck.
Yeah, I know Herman had a couple of questions for you. What you got for him, Herman?
Well, one of the questions I have a comment also on your last journey and how things happen, the way things have happened in your life. I'm a country boy myself. I grew up in Dublin, Georgia, in Lawrence County, and that's what my family used to tell me. God take care of the baby and all foods. And I spent 4 years in the Airforce, and after that I got out and worked in communication with AT&T for 36 years. So it's along the way, there's always opportunity to pay it forward, to help someone else, to be a mentor. And I think you've done a great job doing that. And thank you and appreciate your time. And also, one of the things that I also have started a veteran organization helping veterans with their benefits and entitlement. And as you I was reading the information on how to do that if you, for family members. And one thing, Anthony is, uh, he's the cat, like he said, we've been doing this for 10 years, and he doesn't mind calling anybody and asking them to be a guest. A couple of years ago, we had our fraternity grand bosses on the program. He's still the bosses today. And one thing he told us, we are doing God's work, and that's what I want to say to you. You are doing God's work, and you're doing a great job at it.
He's doing a great job, man. And Tony, I think, again, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're a humble guy. About 2 years ago, you were recognized by the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. Why don't you tell our guests about that? Because my wife and I attended that function, and that was awesome.
Well, and thank you for mentioning it. I guess I just sort of just do my job. But what you're referring to is the FAA Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award. Well, in 2023, the FAA has the highest award that they give any pilot in the world. It's called the FAA Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award. And I received I was a recipient of that award in 2023 during Black History Month. And they don't even consider you until you have at least 50 years behind you of aviation experience, professionalism, safety. Those are the things that they look at, and achievement. And I think I was one of the first African Americans to receive the award. They looked at my background and saw that I had over 22,000 hours of flying time, jet time, combination of jets and mostly jets, and civilian airplanes too, because I had been a flight instructor. And once again, this is a little boy that jumped out of a window, never been on an airplane before in his life, never been to an airport, didn't know anyone involved, but yet I got the FAA Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award. So I was very humbled about that. Thank you for mentioning it.
Well, I thought it was extremely, significant, and my wife and I were there, and to see you receive it along with another pilot, another pilot. So it's significant. And the reason I brought it up because your story could be inspirational to others, to let them know that regardless of your background, where you came from, with help, support, and God in the path, look what put Anthony Tony Holder today, where you're still being recognized and your story is being inspirational to others, because it's also telling a story that you can come from a project, you can go to a historical Black college and university and still be a success. It doesn't have to be a D1 or whatever they call those schools.
Yeah, PWI.
PWI. Yeah, doesn't have to be a PWI.
Yeah,
it could be an HBCU.
It's funny that you made me recall that something that happened while I was in pilot training. And while I was in pilot training, I was halfway through the program. The program is 1 year long, and it's probably the hardest program I've ever been, because not just because of the academics, but the flying. You have to be able to do not just the academics, but you got to be able to fly the airplane. Some guys can do the academics and can't and wash out for flying. Some guys could fly and wash out for academics, but you got to be able to combine them both in order to succeed and get out of the program. But like I said, we started with 60 and only 30 of us finished, and all of those guys were PWI, except for me, predominantly white institute. And one of the things I remember during the springtime of my year there, they had a officers call, and it was a black tie formal affair for officers at the officers club. Well, heck, I was the only black officer on the base, and I was there with my fellow students. So they had a receiving line, and you had to meet the base commander and everybody else, the higher service people who were there. So I was in line to part of the receiving line, and when I got to the base commander, he asked me, so, well, Lieutenant, because I was a lieutenant at the time. He said, where are you from? I said, my name is Lieutenant Anthony Holder. I'm from Howard University. And he said to me, is that little black school in Alabama? I said, no, sir. I think he was referring to Tuskegee.
Tuskegee, yeah.
But that's what he asked me. He says, is that the little black school in Alabama? I said, well, no, sir. Howard University is in Washington, D.C. See, that's how they were thinking back then.
Yeah.
That if you're a black person learning how to fly, you only came out of Tuskegee.
Right. Well, tell us, how was your Air Force experience?
Actually, it was the best thing about it was I always say the best thing about my Air Force experience, I never had to go cold. All my assignments were in warm weather. I had a guy, I had a guy on my pilot. See, at the end of selecting your airplane where you're going to go, you get to choose your base or your airplane or a combination of both. Some guys will take the airplane and they don't care where the airplane is. Some guys refuse to go to cold places. Well, anyway, by the time it got to me, it was a B-52 up in Kinchlow. Well, Kinchlow is all located in northern Michigan, near the Canadian border. So, I'm from New York, but I had never been that cold before. So after I made my class selection, as I was leading out of the classroom, one of my classmates came up to me and said, "Hey, Tony, you got that base up in Kinchlow up in northern Michigan. I've got Southern California, Los Angeles. You want to trade with me?" Well, it took me about a New York second to figure that one out. So we swapped assignments, and he took my base, B-52, to Kinchlow, and I took his base, B-52, to Riverside, California, Southern California. And that was the best thing could have happened to me. And I went from there, Southern California, and then I went overseas to Guam and spent 2 years in Guam. So I never had to go cold. Put it that way.
Well, I was in the Air Force as an enlisted person, and I'm from South Georgia, and I was stationed at Aiken for a while. I also spent 6 months in North Dakota, and I definitely was ready to get out
Why
of
not?
there.
Why not? That's what we call it. Why not? Why not? That's going cold.
Well, you guys in the Air Force had some very interesting assignments in some very interesting locations, Wyoming and Iowa and all these kind of places, whereby the Army guys, we're down with the mosquitoes and snakes, that kind of deal.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about today's young men and women and opportunities in the military. And I would say in the last 3 programs that we have had military veterans on here that were generals, had made generals in the military, and they all went through ROTC, and they all pretty much all went to an HC, historic or Black College University. So I'm asking, and what advice inspiration would you give today's young men and women on considering the military, on considering participating in ROTC?
Well, for me, ROTC turned out to be a lifesaver for me in terms of, although when I was at my HBCU Howard, my plan A was to get my degree in engineering, and And my plan B was this thing called aviation and ROTC. And once I graduated and I was going through pilot training, now I saw that I was becoming very serious about aviation. I already had my engineering degrees. So now my plan B became my plan A, and my plan A became B. But I would not have gotten that without the ROTC program. Okay. I needed ROTC. For one of the things that it did for me was it helped me pay for my aviation experience. I couldn't afford that. Like I said, my parents, we didn't have any money. And so I needed the ROTC program to pay for continuing my experience in aviation. Air Force took care of everything. They paid for everything when it came for me to learn how to fly. And also the education it afforded me and experience it afforded me to get a job later on as an airline pilot. I had to, commit to them because they were paying for everything. I had like a 6-year commitment after I got my wings. I think the commitment is a little bit longer now, but I could not have paid for that experience without the ROTC. I would recommend that young people who want to get that kind of experience do apply for the Air Force, Navy, or Marine Corps and let them pay for it. Otherwise, unless you got money in your pocket, and I don't think there's a whole lot of African Americans walking around with those kind of funds because it's very, very expensive to learn how to fly. Because you can either become a pilot through one of two ways: you either military or civilian. And one of the things also I want to mention too, having gone through the military route, is when you get ready to apply for a job, whether you're a pilot or an engineer or something like that, people are going to take you very seriously. Employers are going to take you very seriously. They know that, A, you gain the commission, you show that you have leadership qualities, and all of those things, your future employer is going to look out should you decide to get out of the military. So you have all of those advantages on your side. You showed you had leadership ability. You showed that you can go to a program and stick with it. You have the discipline. And all of those characteristics, those are the things that employers want to have working for them should you decide to get out and go seek your profession after the military.
Herman, that opened up another can for us because this new administration has really changed the diversity, equity, and inclusion landscape. Totally change it. But I believe Tony has a story about that in regards to how he got to FedEx and the story that he had with the founder of FedEx in regards to the DEI posture for where he is today. Why don't you share that story?
Once again, I don't even think about these. You probably know as much about my background. I just go out and do it. But anyway, while I was in the military as a Air Force pilot, B-52 pilot, one of the people that eventually contacted me, actually I contacted him. I was sitting on what we call nuclear alert, sitting around with other pilots waiting to hear the horn go off and run out to my airplane and jump on it, start the engine, take off and everything else like that. But in the meantime, I'm sort of sitting around lounging, reading the Jet or the Ebony magazine, because back in those days, you can't believe anything unless it's in the Jet or the Ebony. You can't believe it. You don't believe it until you read it in the Jet. Okay. Yeah. In any case, I was reading Jet or Ebony magazine, and I saw this article about this man named Span Watson, and he had been a Tuskegee Airman, original Tuskegee Airman. Well, at the time, I wasn't aware enough to know what an original Tuskegee Airman was. In any case, we didn't have the internet in those days, so what I was so impressed by him, I wrote Johnson Publishing Company, who published both Jet and Ebony, and I wanted a letter sent to this man named Span Watson to tell him, hey, I really appreciate what he had done to lead the path for me to be where I was. And I mailed it, not expecting to hear from him. And about 2 months later, I get a letter. I get a phone call from Span Watson. Yeah, Span had been in the second class Tuskegee Airman. I got pictures of him when he was a young pilot and flying over in Italy as a fighter pilot. Long story short, Span eventually got out of the military and he started a career in the FAA. And a lot of companies would come to him to find out if you knew any qualified people that we could hire as minority pilots. Well, FedEx at the time was very young. I think it was FedEx had started in 1972. So in 1979, so we're talking about 7 or 8 years later, FedEx didn't have any black pilots. They only have one. And Span Watson had reached out to me and said, "Hey, Tony, there's this new company called FedEx, and they were looking for qualified pilots. And they didn't want just any pilot. They wanted to make sure that the pilots that they hired were going to be strong." So Span contacted me, and I went in for my interview. And at the time of my interview, I was 29 years old. I had over 1,200 hours of B-52 time. I had 2 degrees in engineering. I had worked on the MBA. Well, I was, pretty well qualified. And long story short, I ended up getting hired 2 months later, and I was the fourth African American pilot hired at FedEx. I was number 4. They hired 7 of us at the first cadre, and all of us were ex-military pilots. The first one was Carol Waters. He had come out of Morgan State. Second one was Calvin James. He had come out of Tuskegee. The third one was Ty Lewis. I forget where Ty came from, but he was a Navy pilot. I was number 4. James Walker, I think I mentioned to you, Anthony, he came out of Tuskegee. You knew him. Bruce Taylor and Joe Howley. And there were 7 of us. And recently, this past summer, in Memphis, Tennessee, there was a black tie affair, and part of it was the recognition of the first 7 pilots that the first African American pilots that were hired by FedEx, and those that are still living. The 7 of us, 4 are still living, and FedEx came and invited us back to the Memphis to do an interview about working with the company, being the very first African American pilots there at the company, and we were honored to attend. The 4 of us were there. But anyway, we were not DEI hires. We were definitely, all of us were very, very well qualified. I knew I was pretty well qualified, and so were all the other guys. So when they talk about DEI, they can point to me as a DEI, but I wasn't hired because they were trying to fill a void. FedEx made it very, very clear that the guys that you bring in, that we invite in for hiring or even an interview, they had to be very well qualified. Each and every one of us were just that.
Yeah, that's the point I was trying to get to let our listeners know that you were very, 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 very well qualified. Your background, your number of hours flying, that you came to FedEx and made a difference.
Yeah.
And the result ended up with, what did you say, 22,000 hours flying?
Yeah, most pilots end up with the average of around 17, 18, and that's considered pretty high. I ended up with over 22,000 and over 3,000 landings. That's pretty high.
Yeah.
That would probably put me as one of the most experienced African American pilots in the world. Someone once told me, in the world.
That's amazing story from the projects, Herman. Superman.
Yes, and my take on all of the drama today about DEI is uh, just keep doing the best you. If you're the best at what you do, you are qualified. We still will get opportunities in all of the drama and all of the political situations uh, don't let it affect you. Keep your eye on the prize, and you'll get it anyway.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Well,
I also want to mention too, while working in my aviation career from the very first time I got my wings, I've always been called out to do career days and talk to kids, and that's what I've done for over 40 years. But one of the things I also want to mention, I'd like to see more females in aviation. Okay, I'd like to see more females in aviation because the white females have caught up to the African American males and surpassed them in numbers. The black females, the African American females, are just now starting to enter the cockpit, but they're way below the number of white females. And I tell them all the time, whenever I do career days, and I tell the girls, look, you're in the cockpit with me. You're sitting next to me, and we're over the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean. We're going to Hong Kong or Paris or something like that. I asked them, well, what are you going to do? The white female said, well, oh, Tony, I'm probably going to go shopping and sit at a cafe and drink a bottle of wine or whatever, what else like that. Lay around for 2 or 3 days in Hawaii or whatever. And they're getting paid $200,000 a year. And I'm the captain, and I'm telling them turn left, turn right, go up and down. Hey, I can take a black woman and teach her to do the same thing.
exactly right.
I can take her, let her get that money.
Yep.
Let her sit around.
Yeah.
Let her have a career. So please, women, don't think that you can't. This is something you can't do. Yes, you can. These white females have already figured it out, and they outnumber the black males now.
Wow. That's amazing. Amazing. I'm glad you're encouraging because
Well,
we try to do the same thing.
speaking on career days, what other bits of information would you like to provide regarding careers opportunity?
Oh, well, there's so many things you can do, and from the military, especially when you get out of the military, and you get once again, they look for people who are stable and they had a profession in the military. There's so many things you can do, whether it's engineering, medicine, business, aviation, mechanics, whatever. You can do just about anything coming out of the military, and people respect that. Okay, whether you came out as an enlisted or you came out as an officer.
That's great.
Yeah. So, are you doing any mentoring of any young person now, or are you involved with some other activities like that?
Yes, I am. Fortunately, even though I've been retired for 10 years, I'm still involved. I'm with our fraternity, the Omegas. I'm involved with the STEM programs here with the local chapter. I'm still involved. I get calls all the time about young people who want to get into aviation, or even older people who want to get into aviation, and they seek direction and guidance. A lot of people don't understand, and they mean well when they're trying to get direction and guidance, especially when it comes to aviation. Unless you've been there and done it, you really don't understand the requirements. It's pretty much a all white male fraternity that you're trying to get into if you're a minority, whether you're female or African American or whatever else like that. You have to understand the nuances of what it takes to get into that fraternity, okay? Because they're very jealous about it because it pays so well. It takes a lot of education and it pays so well. So they're very protective of it. Yes, we are breaking the barriers down, but I would say seek out the advice of someone who's been there before. And that's why I keep on mentoring and talking to kids or whatever else like that. I'm working with a group called the Dayans, which is the former military group here in Atlanta, Georgia. And there must be about 120 members in that group. And I'm the only African American in the organization up until a couple of months ago. I just finally convinced another African American pilot to join that group. And one of the things we do is go to, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been going to high school to the Junior ROTC Awards programs and giving out our service medals to these young kids. our people need to see that there are people like me and Mike who just joined the group. Okay, they need to know that there are African American males that served in both the military and or civilian world.
I guarantee you, half of America does not know that Anthony Holder, fourth African American pilot with FedEx with over 22 flying hours and over 3,000 touches, they don't know that story. So
No,
that was very, very important. And as I was sharing it with the WCEG family almost 2 weeks ago, that your story, yes, I do know your story. I have researched you and I've been involved with you and I'm impressed with you. So I wanted to make sure that Herman and Miss Vivian and Miss Penny, and all of our listeners knew about you because you're not the type to go out and boast. So I am very, very happy that you were able to be our guest. And please share this video with all of your friends and your network because it's going to be all over social media. And some young people and people with visions and you can inspire someone. What do you think, Herman?
Well, definitely, and that is part of what helped us to find WCEG, Penny, in the group is to empower the community, to empower, provide information, like Tony mentioned, that if you are not part of the there's a lot of organization, there's a lot of career opportunities at high levels in corporate America that unless a lot of times you have one black male there and also like you said, white female has passed us and but it's the community and veterans is to get the information, the opportunities out there to build networks, to be a real networks, to be a real communication networks that with people that are trustworthy, and we are just not throwing stuff out. We do our homework, and we have guests that has a reputation.
Yep. So look, we're about to close out. Our director has been sending us a little text saying you guys need to think about closing out for a minute. So before we do that, we just want to say thank you again there, Captain Anthony Tony Holder, for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to be our guest today. And I'm sure your story has been inspirational and uplifting to our listeners. And we want to say thank you. So Herman, why don't you just go in and close us out, man? You do a great job with that.
Well, first of all, Tony, we are running overtime. You have a closing remark.
well, once again, I just want to thank you for having me on your program. And once again, God watched out for this little boy that grew up to be who it was. As I said, God watches out for fools and little babies. And I was well over the age of 2.
Well, thank you very much. And as I mentioned earlier, I was taught the same thing. And I grew up in the South, and we glad we had you on here to help us empower the community. We asked our listeners to come back in 2 weeks. Veterans Today and WCEG Media will have another great guest, and we asked Tony to keep watching us and keep being part of our network. We thank you, and we thank all our listeners.
Thank you, Herman. Great job. And let's say kudos to Miss Vivian, our studio manager there, lady that keeps us together, and Miss Rogers, our mustard seed queen. This is her vision, and you're part of the WCE Family Network. So again, on behalf of the Veterans Today talk show, thank you, thank you.